1.9 is not just Lucy patch. Soon we'll finally reunite with a familiar face, Kakania. To prepare for the occasion, let's know more about her. Welcome to her build guide. Kakania is a planned support character that deals mental damage. She brings unique mechanics and unusual damage sources. Thanks to her abilities, she's able to intercept allies' damage, buff, passively heal, and much more. Let's go ahead and see what her abilities are. Kakania makes use of a new mechanic, called Empathy. So far, she's the only character able to use something like this, and because of it, she's very unique in what she does. Empathy is a mechanic that Kakania acquires in her Insight. Her Insight 1 enables it and makes Kakania redirect 50% of any damage on other allies to her. When she receives damage, 10% of it gets stored as Empathy, which can store up to 20% of Kakania max HP. Once Empathy fills up, Kakania will then stop redirecting the damage. Her Insight 2 is an increase of 5% of her HP, and her Insight 3 adds more depth into the new mechanic. Whenever Empathy stores 3% of Kakania's max HP worth of damage, it will now automatically heal all allies based on 10% of max HP, adding a passive supportive heal into her kit. Empathy will also dish out Genesis damage to all enemies equal to 100% of the current Empathy amount, making this mechanic pretty well-rounded. Now, Empathy might sound confusing by just listening, so let's recap by making a little visual example. Our Kakania is I3 and has 10,000 HP. She's in a Lucy team with 6 in VILA and they're fighting a boss. With this scenario, Empathy can store up to a maximum of 2000 HP. Kakania will also actively redirect 50% of all allies' damage to her. The boss casts an AoE for 2000 damage to everyone. Lucy, 6 and VILA take a 1000 damage hit and Kakania takes her 2000 plus 3000, so a total of 4000 damage. Empathy takes 10% from it, 400, and stores it. Now, since 400 is more than 3% of Kakania's max HP, Empathy will now heal everyone by 1000. This healing also triggers the final effect of Insight 3 and deals 400 Genesis damage to all enemies. Obviously, this is an example to help understand the Empathy mechanic. In a normal fight, all of these effects will trigger more often and with higher power. You will heal more, do massive Genesis AoE damage, and mitigate. Now that we learned what her Insight and Empathy do, let's move on to her skills. Kakania has 1 attack and 1 buff skill. Subconscious is a 1-target attack that deals 180 to 450% mental damage plus 180 to 260 of current Empathy as extra Genesis damage. And Association is a 1-target buff that also has 2 different effects depending on who's the target. If cast on Kakania herself, it'll heal by an amount equal to 20% of her max HP. If cast on other allies, Kakania will lose 10% max HP and grant a buff called Solace to them, lasting for 2 rounds. Solace is a special buff that increases the target flat attack by 300 plus an additional amount equal to 10% of current Empathy. This means that thanks to Solace and good planning, you'll be able to increase the base attack on your damage dealer by a lot. It's a really good buff because flat attack is the base that all skills refer to, so every percentage damage you see on your hyper carry's abilities will be improved by having a higher base attack. Her ultimate, id, ego, super ego, it's a 1-target attack. Deals 400% mental damage plus 1000% of current Empathy as Genesis damage to the target. It'll also reset Empathy to 0 and start recording the total damage the target enemy takes for the round. At the end of the round, it will deal 30% of the total recorded damage as extra Genesis damage. So, for max outcome, you should start your turn with this, then do as much damage as possible with the other allies to boost the final Genesis hit. Also, because of the empathy reset, try to get your buff out before you do the ultimate, or the value will be at 0 and you'll lose some damage. Let's now move on to our portraits. Kakania has a couple of good portraits. In case you have the resources to get some, then the most impactful would be P2 and P3. P1 increases the Solace attack buff and percentage of empathy scaling, but it's not a huge increase. However, P2 reduces the empathy threshold from 3 to 2, making heals more frequent and easier to trigger, while also increasing Genesis damage. P3 is another good one, increasing empathy's pool size to 30%, resulting in a higher damage and survivability, since Kakania will keep mitigating damage for longer. P4 is just an increase in empathy percentage, and P5 boosts the initial damage empathy hit to 1300% and the recorded damage cap to 45%, boosting the intensity of the hyper carry's total damage. That said, it's important to remind everyone that you do not need any portraits to fully utilize the character, so only get them if you want to go all out. When it comes to Psychubes, Kakania only has one really intended for her, the Fighter's Best Wishes. You can buy it in the shop, and it provides Kakania with max HP, Genesis damage, and helps her take less damage during the fight. Considering the fact that Kakania wants to have as many HP as possible for empathy, her resonance will obviously be a survival one, with a focus on HP. You could however opt for a more attack-oriented one in case you feel like you don't need as much survivability. Kakania's role and capabilities make her somewhat universal, but units that have high burst damage spikes are definitely going to be the best choice when it comes to DPS. That said, she will work wonders with many characters such as WINDSONG or Joe, synergizing with her ultimate for a crazy Genesis nuke setup. Paired with Marcus, she will provide flat damage while also helping trigger her plant unit requirement. She can also play with Tuesday, making use of the Genesis damage taken debuff in a full dot team. You can use her with Lucy, especially in a stage where there aren't many enemies to kill, making her flat attack buff more impactful. That said, she will work with almost every DPS, except maybe Chu due to the incompatibility of a flatter's weaknesses, but besides a couple of scenarios, you can safely slot her in every team if needed. Overall, Kakania is a pretty unique and universal unit, and despite the fact that she does remain a luxury pool, having the opportunity to have her on your team will certainly be a great addition. That's it for today's guide. If you have any questions, leave a comment below or come ask me live at twitch.tv/Jakazin. Thank you for watching and see you next time.